Okay, we're going to talk about moist cooking methods today. Okie doke. So, first thing is boiling. Moist cooking technique in which you bring water to a boil. Water boils at 212 degrees. Bring it to a boil, put your product in, and cook away. All right. Boiling point, like I just said, temperature is 212. You bring the water up to that temperature, drop the product in, and cook away. Convection. Now, a lot of times you hear this word, and this word is associated with an oven. The reason it's called a convection oven is because there's a fan built into the oven, and instead of the heat just coming directly from the below, the fan circulates the heat inside of the oven. So the same thing happens when you're boiling water. The hot water, just like air, rises to the top and then it bubbles and then it cools off and it goes back to the bottom, right? So the process of making things move around is called convection. So if you are boiling water, you are actually doing a convection because it is making it go into a circle. It goes to the top when it gets hot, it goes back to the bottom as it gets cold, and it circles around, all right? Many of you have made rice with me. The ones who have made rice with me know exactly how this works, in the sense that when we make the rice, we bring it to a boil, right, to begin the process. Then we turn it down to a simmer, right? So boiling is at 212, simmering is roughly about 170, 180 degrees, and it should be little tiny bubbles. What you want to see when you boil, the water goes, it circulates fast. And when you simmer, it circulates, but it circulates much slower. So when you're making that rice, you want that stock that you have the rice cooking in to be very flavorful, and you want to see a bunch of little dots where the water had or the stock had come up and then gone back down, and come up and gone back down. When you open the lid after you turn it down to a simmer and you look at your rice pot, there should be a bunch of little dots. If there's a bunch of little dots where you can see where the water came up and went down, then you did it correctly. Okie doke. All right, so simmering. It's like boiling, but the liquid is not as hot. So when you simmer, you're simmering between 185 and 200 degrees. So 195 is just about right. Poaching is a little bit less, and we'll get to that in a second. But like we already talked about, boiling is at 212 degrees. Okay. Reduction, or to reduce. All right. So when you have a sauce and you want to reduce it down to consolidate the flavor, to fortify the flavor. And when you reduce it, the process of simmering will reduce that sauce. What will happen is a lot of the liquid, the water in that sauce, will evaporate. When that water evaporates, the leftover stuff like you can see in this pan, oops, back please, thank you. Leftover stuff you can see in the bottom of this pan, it fortifies the flavor, and the water evaporates and it strengthens the flavor and the taste, and it also thickens the sauce. The more that the water is gone, the thicker the sauce is going to be. That's known as reducing it, or a reduction. So a lot of times when you're doing a saute dish, you'll saute it and then you'll hit the pan to deglaze it, which I'll talk about in a second, and then you'll sit there and let it simmer. And when it simmers, it reduces, compacts the flavor, and it also thickens the sauce. All right? Poaching. Okay, so back to what I said before, when we go back to here, poaching is 170 degrees approximately. All right, so you go to 150 to 185. It's usually done with a delicate type of fish, or a lot of people know it for eggs Benedict, so you're going to poach an egg. So you bring the temperature of the water between 150 and 185. You don't go any higher than that. You submerge the item in the liquid, and you slowly cook it. Again, it's usually something that's delicate, so it doesn't take a long time to cook. And it's usually done on top of the stove. Okay, steaming. Now, there's two different photos here. One is of the commercial steamer, which you'll see in our kitchens, and the other one is old school way. The main thing that you need to know is it's an enclosed environment. All right, so this would be an enclosed environment. This right here would have a lid on it, so that steam would be enclosed. The lid is off, so you can see the photo. But it's a closed environment. So on top of the stove, you have a lid on top, and you have like a basket inside. And the only thing that's cooking it is the vapor from the water that's boiling, right? And then the convection steamer, a commercial steamer, excuse me, you know, the door closes, there's steam pumped in both sides, and the product cooks inside this confined area. Okay. Combination cooking. Combination is when you take the dry cooking method, which we already talked about, and you combine that with a moist cooking method. So the two things that we're going to do with that is either braising or stewing. All right. So braising is a long, slow cooking method. Usually what you're going to do is you're going to take the parts of the animal that have lots of tissues and tendons and need to be broken down. Therefore, you can cook it for a long period of time, and it will help to take those tough pieces of meat and make them as tender as possible. And usually what you're going to do is you're going to take it and you're going to sear the outside, which we already spoke about. Once that's the dry cooking part, and then you're going to cover it with liquid, and you're going to either do it on top of the stove or in the oven and let it cook at a low temperature for a long period of time. All right, so fond. When you sear the inside, when you sear the piece of meat, there's a stuff called fond. In French, it means base. Commonly refers to the brown, excuse me, the brown bits or caramelized droppings. They're at the bottom of the pan. So you can see this is where the roast was, and all the brown stuff that's left over, that's called the fond. All right. It's got lots of flavor. It's got a good amount of color. So when you're making your sauce or your gravy, you want to make sure that you take the fond off the bottom of the pan. So how do we do that? We do that by deglazing. So you can see they're adding a little bit of red wine, and here's the fond at the bottom of the pan. Put it back on the stove. Get heat from below. Add get it nice and warm. Add the liquid, whether it's stock or wine or water, and take a spoon, or like in this case, they've got a wooden spoon, and you're scraping all the fond off. That's what you're going to make your sauce with. You're going to get all that goodness and all that flavor off. Two things will happen there. One, you'll get color. Two, you'll get flavor. And I thought the third one. Three, you'll make your pot washers happy, because you're not going to give them this stuff they have to scrape off, because you're going to take most of it off. All right, and that's usually when you're sauteing or when you're searing something that we're going to deglaze. All right, stewing. It's also a combination cooking method, but the difference is the stuff is completely submerged in liquid when it's cooking, and it's usually cut into smaller pieces. When you braise, it's usually a big item. When you stew, it's usually a smaller piece of food. Doesn't cook as long as the braising does. All right, so that concludes the dry cooking and combo cooking methods. Thank you very much, and have a good day.